story of the Nephilim, the sons of God, was right before the flood. So it's like these events are not disconnected. This is leading toward the flood. You know, when you grow up in church, you don't really hear anything about the flood except for people were really bad. Okay, what does that mean? Obviously, it's a perspective thing. So what does it mean really bad? Like, why would God destroy the whole earth?
There's a reason why God flooded the earth, okay? People don't understand that God didn't just flood the earth because the earth was full of evil, the end. Okay, when you read the book of Enoch and you read the book of Jubilees and Jasher and you read these other ancient texts, you get a more clear understanding of why God flooded the earth. God flooded the earth because there were no more humans left in it. Noah and his family and his sons were the only beings that were pure in generations, the Bible says. That means genetically pure. They were the only ones left that were pure genetically. They were the only humans left on the earth. Everybody had already interbred and mixed in with genetic, angelic, animal, hybrid, DNA, mixed things.
Most of the people had been corrupted. They had this sons of God. They had this angel DNA. They were giants. And according to the book of Enoch, they were like cannibalistic. They were horrible.
This was what we call the seed of Satan, okay? The seed of the serpent. The Bible talks about the seed of the serpent, and it talks about the seed of man. This is what it's referring to. These animal, human, hybrid, angelic, perverted creatures of God's perfect genetics.
A question that often gets asked, if God flooded the earth to destroy the Nephilim, how were there Nephilim afterwards? Well, I think that this is an interesting question.
And there's actually a lot of differing ideas and quite a lot of debate on how this actually happened.
Some people believe there was like a second incursion, that the angels came back and did it again. Some people believe, yeah, there was some kind of a science-y thing they did. They did some kind of a witchcraft, something to bring them back.
When Noah's sons chose their wives, they may not have been pure in genetics because they weren't the only ones that were pure in genetics, like the Bible had said. They may have had distant Nephilim, angelic DNA bred into them in some way, because the Bible says that the Nephilim were there in those days and after. So somehow the Nephilim, some remnant of them, survived the flood, okay? And that remnant came on the boat with, I believe, Noah's sons' wives. And they were reintroduced into society via genetic Punnett square random chance that a giant was born out of one of their children. And that giant became its own tribe of people and took over the whole promised land.
Because I believe there was a second incursion. The angels did it again. If you read in Genesis 6:4, it says, the Nephilim were in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. So before and after the flood, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men.
For me, it's hard to believe in the second incursion theory because I believe that God flooded the earth literally to end the first generation of giants. And if there was a second incursion, then that would just bring back the giants again. So I think it had to have come from the genetic gene pool. And also it mentions in the book of Enoch that Michael's talking to Raphael about how the punishment that God put on these first initial angels that slept with the women, it was such a severe punishment, anyone's heart that hears about it would be softened by it. And basically that no man nor angel shall ever partake in their portion of judgment or punishment again. And also mentions whose reins are not troubled, meaning like it will change your direction, knowing this punishment was so severe for these angels that no angel would ever do it again. However, I do believe there is attempts to try to recreate the fall, and I think a lot of satanic practices are just that. They're trying to entice angels to sleep with women again, and a lot of these satanic rituals
kid can't ride in a bus because the seats are too small and the roof's too low. Can't eat out because...
Give her a big hand is an expression that has only one meaning for a 26-year-old. Expensive special suits become too small in a few months. No stock shirts, hats or socks will fit him. And his boots come at £25 a pair.
I'm Robert Wadlow, 7 feet tall, 12 years old, and weigh 240 pounds.
When he reaches middle school, Robert experiences another growth spurt, but his is extreme.
At the age of 13, Robert's 7 foot 4 inches tall, and he's the world's tallest Boy Scout, which of course makes the merit badges real tiny on his chest, I suppose.
And when you say someone's too big for their britches, well, he literally is.
The shoes, the pants, the shirts, all of it has to be made from scratch.
I wear the largest pair of shoes ever made.
Obviously, Robert Wadlow is not going to be walking into a shoe store and asking for a size 37. It's simply not going to happen.
But what exactly is making young Robert so big?
Robert Wadlow has gigantism, which is almost always caused by the pituitary gland constantly resupplying the body with growth hormone.
He never, ever, 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 through his whole life, stops growing.
By the time he's 22, Robert reaches an astonishing 8 feet 11 inches. That's taller than Andre the Giant by 1.5 feet.
The tallest players ever to play in the NBA are 7'7". So he dwarfs the tallest persons ever to play in the NBA.
Who held the sword better, this gentleman or this one? Just like the doors here. Put a pet door on it. Makes sense for us little people now. Now look at the weapons of wars, the cannons. They say that we carted these off into battlefields with horse and buggy. Loaded them up with massive cannonballs. At least that's what the narrative tells us. Well, let's take a look at some of these depictions of us little people operating these massive cannons. Sure, just lay them right on the ground or build some rickety wooden frame around them. Yeah, that'll definitely work in a battlefield. These giant cannons weren't made for us any more than this giant chair was made for us. We once shared this land with a much larger people. Question everything, friends.
Not very long ago, we can see what appears to be a giant humanoid figure inside of a cave in Mexico in Cabo San Lucas.
Man disappeared months after filming a giant, y'all. Yeah, you heard that right, a giant. On April 10th, 2022, Andrew Dawson posted a video of a giant standing on top of a mountain in Canada. 4 days later, he posted an update being stopped by a CIA agent when trying to visit the site again.
Really?
3 days later, he shared a video of being stopped by a suspicious black vehicle outside of his home. On May 6th, Dawson posted a video claiming that all of his videos were fake, but you can tell in this video that he is disturbed by something or someone. 10 days later, he posted yet another video claiming that all of his videos were in fact not fake. Andrew has since disappeared, with the only update being an obituary indicating that he had passed away.
Andrew Dawson thing about this guy disappearing, getting taken out by the CIA because he was on to something. I literally have goosebumps right now. I want to show you guys something. Alright, so I found the coordinates of where he took the picture. I marked it here with his name so I don't forget. But it was right around the Cedar Side. You see Cedar Side here behind this star, Cedar Side Regional Park, which means that if he was on this road looking this way, which he was, it would have been over on this mountain here. So when I scroll in to this mountain, and if you guys remember what the pictures look like, you see this road here, but if you remember what the pictures looked like, there was like a building with 2 antennas. Look at this shit. What's that? What is this? A tall figure and the building with 2 antennas.
Look.
Disappear into a magical doorway within the rock face here at the Giant's Causeway. Right, I believe we have some footage that has been taken on a mobile phone. Let's have a look at it.
Look.
Well, that footage is absolutely incredible, isn't it? Well, earlier today, tourists, historians, geologists, architects and giant experts all congregated here and have been examining the rock face to see if there is indeed any sign of Finn McCool, that legendary and magical giant, in that spot where he disappeared into the rock face. But absolutely no trace, it has to be said, of any doorway or hinges or anything like that. But there was the unmistakable sound of snoring coming from within the mountain. That's right, snoring from within the mountain. So it would seem possibly plausible that the legend...
Secret doors were hidden in plain sight. This is proof.
Oh, we got them now. What are they going to say about this now? Even stranger is what nearby residents are seeing. Take a look.
So there it is, Nephilim door. It's like 50 to 60 feet high. It's like 14, 15 feet wide. Little weird porch on the front. Stunning. Here we are in the Canyonlands, near where the Citadel was discovered in the Grand Canyon. And here you go.
Have you heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh? So this is a statue of Gilgamesh. All the carvings, they all look the same. This is how he looked. The tomb of Gilgamesh was supposedly discovered in Iraq. There's a big conspiracy theory around this. So in 2003, there was this big announcement. Scientists found what they believed to be the tomb of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh stood 17 feet tall. Within a couple weeks, the U.S. invades Iraq, and one of the base camps we set up first was at this site for some reason. There were locals around the area that said they saw the American soldiers digging. There was also a museum that was completely raided. Not only that, they left behind gold, things that looters take. So what did they take?
A dead giant that had terrorized a certain village in Afghanistan and actually killed 5 special operations men who were hunting this giant out when they were looking for Al-Qaeda in the caves, or the Taliban in the caves. And the story went, and this is a man who was charged with taking the carcass. He was to fly it from Bagram Air Force Base to Mannheim Air Force Base in Germany. And by the way, I saw him face to face. He proved he was who he said he was. There are certain things I don't tell people about giants because that's the only way I can see if they're just recycling information off the internet. He passed every test with flying colors. He even told me the pallet number that fits in a C-130. It had a numerical designation, I think like an L8 or something pallet. That may not be it. I've written about that, by the way. I've actually posted that entire letter in my book, Long Walkers. But the gist of it is, you have a skeptic until he hears the story. This giant was supposedly 12 feet tall. He was in an embryo position on a pallet. He was brought in under security and top secret. The pilot and his co-pilot and everybody was, any cameras and camera phones had to be taken off the airplane, and the only way they got to see was they lifted the tarp. And by lifting the tarp, he was horrified to see and to smell this thing. All of the people that have encounters, and by the way, interesting, we talked about this off camera, that the people who encounter Bigfoot are always referencing a unusually sickening foul smell. And that's interesting because, again, when Jesus was commanding the unclean spirits, one of the words for unclean in Greek, as you know, is foul smelling or decaying. It means corrupted.
Right.
And so getting into the story, when I received that, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the cover of Genesis 6 Giants, those are two pretty tall individuals that were in the area, and this is in the late 1890s to 1900. The British guy's 6'2" that we see on that cover. And so searching the world for photographs of giants, the number one thing people must understand is that under no circumstances will the powers that be at this point allow the stuff, meaning photographic, video evidence, or artifacts, that they can help to be released to the public.
Now, Steve, let me stop you right there and say I've talked to people who've seen giants, now not living ones, but dead ones. I know of one old country preacher who ran for the Arizona State Senate, and during his campaign travels, he ran into a little museum by a gas station out in northwest Arizona, and around back was this little museum, and he went in there, and one of the exhibits was a petrified, as he called her, an Indian maiden who was in the kneeling position with her hands across her front like this. And he looked at me and he said, "Gary, I'm telling you the truth. I'm nearly 6 feet tall, and I had to look up to see her face, and she was in the kneeling position. And she was mummified." Now, I believe that man because I know his testimony. And that he's passed on to be with the Lord, but he was a preacher of the Lord Jesus Christ, and he would never tell a tall tale.
When you talked about northern Arizona, it's fascinating because Tom Horn was down when he was doing his work on the Vatican, the Lucifer telescope, and the whole Mount Graham thing. I had people in that same area, northern Arizona into southern Arizona, into Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, talking with the Native Americans who have a lot of stories to tell. But fascinating about the area that the preacher was referring to that you just shared the story on, that's in the position of a known stargate. And that's fascinating to me because even in southern Utah, southern Utah has a lot of copper plates. We haven't talked about the copper plates, but the ancients made sure they wrote on the copper plates because erosion, sure, copper will tarnish, but they would inscribe it deep enough, and some of the skills to do that, some of the copper plates look like they were cut out with a laser, and they cannot take old technology. In other words, these guys weren't doing it with obsidian knife blades, okay? And the detail is exquisite. So the entire desert Southwest, Monument Valley, for instance, and the Valley of the Giants, which is a little bit north and west of Monument Valley, is notorious for having legends, and also, you're going to love this, desiccated giants.
Desiccated.
Desiccated. That means they've been basically not freeze-dried, but air-dried. They've been dehydrated. And not from lack of water, from a lot of years. And on my website, genesis6giants.com, on the illustrations, you'll see a sketch that a gentleman who found a giant king and queen on thrones in a cave, desiccated. And the story or the bylines was he was supposed to tell me where they were at and let me come and see them. Because, again, I want you to know that this is kind of like the ultimate validation and verification, not only of Genesis 6, but of how history is going to play out. If they showed up once before the flood, the fallen angels, they showed up after the flood, did the same thing. And people say, well, I don't believe there was a second incursion of angels. Ladies and gentlemen, where do you think Goliath came from? Where do you think Og, the king of Bashan, came from? And by the way, Goliath had 4 other brothers that were giants too. And that's why David took 5 smooth stones. The story of David fighting Goliath is wonderful, but David's mighty men, this is a great story, Yuri, and it's biblical. They wouldn't allow David to go out and take 4 on. So the mighty men of David took it on themselves to go and slay Goliath's giant brothers. Isn't that cool?
It is.
Now that's,
Yeah.
and notice this, they weren't jealous of David. And nowadays, they'd take it upon themselves to go and slay David,
Right.
because of jealousy and envy. It's so wonderful to see that history not only plays out again. So you spent a majority of your life studying ancient history. You know ancient history. You
Sure.
spent a majority of your life absolutely getting amassing voluminous amounts of data. And it seems like the goodness of the living God now, he's putting all those bits and pieces to us together so we can present a mosaic, you're going to love this word, mosaic of reality to his people so they can really know. Remember this, the Word of God teaches that there's nothing that's hidden that won't be made known or made manifest and revealed. And that goes for history, too.
Now, you don't separate the idea of giants from the idea of fallen angels. It's really part and parcel, the same phenomenon. The fallen angels did something that they shouldn't have done. They left the place that they were originally designated to live because they saw greener pastures. And those greener pastures happened to be earth. They came, according to the scripture, and took earthly wives, which resulted in a genetically malformed offspring. And out of that come all of these stories about the giants. So we're really talking about a biblical narrative here. And you can't really separate the fallen angels from the giants. And today, Steve, and we've talked about this, you have not only giant creatures, you have the appearance of supernatural beings, of gigantism. That is to say, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call them, Sasquatch. The Indians talk about these things. Supernatural types of effects are still resounding through the earth because of the evil deeds of those fallen angels.
We spoke at lunch, Gary, of the sounds that people have heard all over the earth.
Yeah.
That sound like everything from foghorns to gates clanging to some of the strangest sounds in the middle of the wilderness. There was some speculation on YouTube and on the internet. It went so viral so fast. I believe that when Tom Horn wrote his book, The Ahriman Gate, I believe that those were literally the sounds of the gates of hell opening. Because it was cacophonic, it wasn't symphonic. There's a difference, and the gratingness of it. It was something evil. We talked earlier, about the mourning and the sorrow.
Right.
But there's also something sound. It's kind of like the reaction someone gets when you put your fingernails, I don't have any, but you go down the blackboard. It makes you squirm.
Yeah.
Those noises were such a cacophony of irritation, okay, that the source of it couldn't be God, because, we hear the hark the herald angels sing, and the Hebrews we talked about too, that they teach that God literally sang the worlds into existence. Sound preceded light. God said, let there be light.
Yeah.
So the thing that's fascinating to me and why this is relevant is because if we're seeing the gates of hell opening, and just as in the days of Noah, I've spent 4 decades of my life, that's what, 2/3 of my life, trying to not only understand to the best of my ability, but help God's people understand that this is not a metaphor, or it wasn't poetic license of Jesus saying, it's just going to be like it was in the day of Noah. Most people think it rained and God put them in an ark just like he did Noah. It's way beyond that, because the thing is that we're told in Luke 21:36 to watch and pray, that we might escape those things that are coming upon the earth. Again, that word coming upon the earth.
Right.
And
when I read or listened to parts of the book of Enoch, it talks about the fallen angels coming down and teaching the people weaponry, technology, how to farm, how to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then they slept with women and created Nephilim. And then in the book of Enoch, it said these were giant men. Their appetite could never be sustained or whatever. So they would start eating men. And so they're just like these evil giant creature men. But this Native American talked about in America, these star people came down and they taught the natives how to make bow and arrows and how to cultivate
so
farm
it's
and do all this
story.
stuff. And he says, and then these star people would sleep with the women of the tribe. These women would give birth to giants. These giants had red, long hair. He said they would eat the men of our village, or just people. So we had to drive them out and kill them and stuff. I'm like,
it's all lining up.
What?
talking about life in the mountains in Afghanistan.
شیرخان صاحب ته ښې جوړې طبیعت هم ښه ده کور کې خیرات ده ملګري دوستان دی ښه ده چې ښې دا شیرخان دی له کوم ځایه کړی چې را پیدا دی که
دا خو موږ یار ده نو
ښه ډېر ښه
کله خوا دې خوا ګرځو نو دا لږ اشتیا هم کمه وه مخکې هم کیدای شي تا ویډیو یې لیدلی وي
ها
هډوکو څه مشکل لري
مشکل به یې حل شي چای درته راوړو شیرخانه شیرخانه نو که د تا اشتیا کمه وي اشتیا دې زیاته کړو خو دا خو بیا قصه نور هم خرابېږي که نه
نه اشتیا اشتیا خبره دور نه ده لکه
ښه صحیح شو صحیح شو
خوراک کې اوس څنګه یې تا خو ویلې چې خوراک مې صحیح نه ده
دا یو چې خوراک ودي یو چې هډوک کمزوري یو دماغ کمزوري دماغ د المعروف بیماري ده المعروف ته دې مرو دې دا هډوک غټېږي چې مزور راکړي دا هډوک دغه هډوک کمزوري کېږي
بالکل دا پوره مسلکي ده ګوره
بیا ما ته فون راځي
وبه شي په زه ورسېدم
ډېر ټسټونه یې کړي دي څومره د حل لاره لري
دا خو اصلا داسې ووایم چې اول د ده دا بدن چې کوم ده دا بدن په اصل کې د معمولي بدنونو سره فرق کوي دا خو ټول ویني چې دی حجم و قد و قیافه کې تغییر
Why are they hiding this? Look at all these huge buildings in Italy. Do you actually believe normal humans built them? And why are there giant tombs in Italy that nobody speaks about? There's an unbelievable explanation for these huge structures, and it's going to shock you. The island of Sardinia was not just a home to ancient people, it was inhabited by giants. But here's what's crazy. In ancient texts, there are references to huge beings, which says, the giants walked the island and built massive stone towers. This is where things get scary. Hidden reports suggest gigantic human-like bones have been discovered in these tombs. Mainstream archaeology says these bones are the Nuragic people, but some believe they are the remains of an ancient race of giants. These giants are linked to a civilization called the Nuragics, which lived between 1900 and 730 BCE. They built the Nuragis, which are large stone towers, and the amazing giants' tombs. The giants' tombs, or tombe dei giganti, are megalithic graves found all over Sardinia even today. Local legends speak of giants having enormous strength and advanced knowledge. They constructed the Nuragis and other megalithic structures easily. But once these connections were discovered, the true story was buried to protect conventional history.
Biblical giants lived in North America, from the desert lands of the Paiute Indian tribes to the mountain ranges of Canada and the Nahanni Valley. Legends and traditions speak of 10-foot tall, red-haired giants that warred against the people living in North America. Even Abraham Lincoln is quoted saying, "The race of giants that looked upon Niagara Falls as our eyes do now."
Walk with me and I'll show you. I don't know of any other example of a footprint in rock that is as amazing as this. And this should be drawing 20 million tourists to South Africa every year, and nobody knows about it. It's unbelievable. There we have it. Let's get closer. Oh wow. This is just beautiful. Look at this. There's the, you know, when you, there's the big toe and the other 4 toes down to the small toe, down to the heel. What's fascinating about this is anybody that does a study of this will notice this piece sticking out here. It's like when you put your foot in mud and you pull it out, your toes will lift up a little mud where your toes were, and that's exactly what seems to have happened here. This rough granite is just it's pulled up. This overhang here, it's spectacular. And I see that people have been visiting here because they've been leaving little coins here, which is wonderful. Maybe just come closer and show this from more close up. Okay. Well, I don't know who else has filmed this, but
I think we'll put this up for everybody to see, for everyone to really appreciate. This is a spectacular bit of human history. They were giants on Earth.
Alright, so check it out. I'm sitting here going through fucking film, like old ass fucking, like real film. Dude, look at this Civil War footage and tell me what's wrong with it. Look at the multiple people in the background that are definitely like fucking 15 feet tall.
And this is where it gets somewhat unbelievable. He said there was a table 6 or 7 feet tall, a chair about 5 feet tall from where you're sitting, and on that chair was a giant red-headed male that, if I recall right, he said that his head was slouched down on the table and his head was resting on the table, and there was an old parchment there. On this old parchment, there were drawings of other caves in the Caballos, and in particular, he noticed that there was one cave that went from the Caballos all the way over to the San Andres, and he thought that was, he thought that was pretty strange. But then knowing about the Doc Noss store in Orange Swearingen, et cetera, he put 2 and 2 together.
And Tim found an interesting object here, and I'm going to have him tell us the story. But first, Tim, tell me your name, and then tell me the story of finding this.
Okay, I'm Tim Colress, and about 25 years ago, I was looking for the Grazia paintings, and I was looking around there and found this cave, and where the Indians were living in there. The roof was all black, and there was corn cobs in there, and then clearing the back of it, I found this, whatever it is, ceremonial. Looks kind of like a cane, but it's got, it looks like it's pretty old, and I didn't know if it was a cane for the little people that live in the superstitions or what it is. Maybe some of you readers know what it is.
The last sighting of a little person was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, by someone from the Bureau of Land Management. He was on horseback riding through here, checking out the interior, and what he saw angered him. He thought somebody let their little child run naked out in the interior, and he goes, who in their right mind would let a child run loose out here? And when he starts calling down to the thing, it takes off running from him, only to reappear again. But this time, he gets a better look at it, and he realized this is no child. He's got a good look at the face. It's got a wrinkled face, jagged teeth, and it's holding a little weapon in his hand like a spear. So at this time, he's not angry. Now he's frightened. He's looking at something. He knows it shouldn't exist. So now he's drawing his gun, and he's going down there towards it, and it ran into a labyrinth of rocks, and he spent a time looking for it, could never find it again. So these are just some of the stories that natives, including miners, even Jacob Waltz, had encounters in here that he could not explain at all. He said it was time that he would not sleep. He would go to sleep with his gun in his hand, because there were things happening out there that he couldn't understand that even frightened veteran miners like Jacob Waltz. For me, at the museum, I love these stories. I mean, I heard nothing but mining stories the whole time I was there. Then I started talking to some veteran miners, and I started talking to some of the Apaches. They feared these giants, and they feared these little people. They were nothing to be messed with. Apparently, they had superhuman strength. Now, you can imagine an ant can lift 100 times its own weight. These little things could, too. They talked about them lifting up stones that would weigh hundreds of pounds that most humans couldn't even lift up. But yet, these little trolls could lift them up with great ease and throw them at people. It's just one of these, I don't know where to go with this other than that this mountain it's always been fascinating. I think that's why there's such a big draw to this mountain. People from all over the world come here. They're either coming here looking for treasure, They're looking for gold, or they're trying to find out more of these stories of these giants and these little people. There's always been a big thirst of knowledge when it comes to this mountain, people wanting to know more and more. And the more you dive into this, the more it opens up about these stories in here, and they're just fascinating.
Nephilim that live underground, for example, under Mount Hermon, under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They're very active in Area 51, at Neuschwanstein in Germany, also in Antarctica. And they're shapeshifters. And so Nephilim underground have more of their true shape. And I have a very dear friend that the Lord has just blessed me with friendship with her. She is from the royal bloodline, and she was a product of the Hitler Project. So she was birthed out of a conception ritual that involves so much darkness that there was this interplay with the spiritual forces of darkness in her very DNA. And so people that were born as a result of this conception ritual have a third strand in the DNA, and they're able to birth hybrids and Nephilim. So she's one of them. She's from South Africa, and it's not her real name, but she goes by Elle. And so she has experienced both birthing Nephilim, but also she had a Nephilim as her handler for parts of her life, and she experienced unspeakable torture. I mean, it's hard for her to even put words to it, because really as humans we can't comprehend the level of torture. Some of that was underground, and so she saw this Nephilim in its true form.
Alam nyo ba na ang isa sa pinakamatangkad na tao sa buong mundo na naitala sa ating kasaysayan ay si Sulimana Abdul Samid, na meron lang namang taas na 9.6 feet. Grabe, napakatangkad, pantay na sa bubong.
Can't be the only one that's seeing an overabundance of giant content on TikTok these days. It's not just any giant content, they're actually showing us actual giant humans.
Oh, not little guy. Oh, big.
There is a reason why the Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible. Far from the giants that had to be removed, it has us look at the realm for what it really is, a post-apocalyptic one. We have had many resets in our past, some by water and mud, some by fire and brimstone. The controllers of our realm has worked hard to remove all traces of these past advanced civilizations, to keep us dependent on their technologies that makes them rich while keeps us poor. Research the mud flood and fall of Tartaria. Question everything. Trees create hexagonal cell walls, not volcanoes. Just look at these cell walls of a tree. But they tell us what our own eyes see are just some ancient volcanoes. Ancient hexagonal spewing column volcanoes, making remains that look exactly like trees. And it's not just the tree stumps that remain. You can find the evidence everywhere of this, scattered through the hills in the much smaller forests of today. Or we just build right on top of the tree stumps and don't even notice. But when you make the comparison, it's clear. We are but the ants, walking on the remains of a much larger past. They told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Think carefully about that line from 1984. It's essential for you to not know a thing about this realm we live in. For this prison, which its walls are built on the illusion of freedom, where the prisoners never see the bars on the cages, giving them the illusion of freedom. That is what our modern society is, an open-air prison, where the prisoners never see the bars on the cages, keep us blind of our history, our true origins and true natures of this realm. Those are all of our invisible shackles. Question everything, friends.